Happy June, everyone! A new month means a new patch for the Revolution Custom Standard format, bringing with it balance changes to address major power outliers from the format over the first month of the latest rotation. We're also kicking off our second ever Eternal Exhibition side event this month, so we'll also talk a bit about how things have changed from February and what new cards may shake things up a bit. As always, there are links in the description below for your key resources to check out all things for Revolution Custom Standard, such as the Custom Magic Discord server where you can get updates about and play the format against others, as well as check out all of the cool cards and sets that people in the community are designing. The Revolution Compendium, where you can look through all of the cards the curators recommend for consideration in your decks, sorted by card roles. The official LackeyBot format search, a search engine integrated into the same website as the compendium and tournament data, complete with patch history and data on what decks a card is seeing play in. The other search engine, Escape from Limbo, a Scryfall-like website using the GitHub framework set up by Canterbury Egg, and showcasing the cards in the format with complete visual spoilers, a random card button, a sets catalog, and built-in deck builder. Tremor's Visual Revolution deck builder with plenty of built-in tags to sort through cards quickly, and a built-in League deck catalog. And perhaps most importantly now, Time Spiral's Intro to Revolution video, which you can also find in the info card on screen now. Check out all of these spaces with the links in the description below. This month, our changes are focused squarely on balancing out decks after last month's Grand Prix and League results, toning down top-performing pieces and strategies to make room for other decks to emerge and thrive. Blue was, as has been the case for most of this year, one of the most prominent colors in the top of the GP field last month, and Stargazing's sins have gone far enough. It's now going up from common to uncommon and having its cost increased to 2, with the catch that its cast on a future turn effect now free casts it only on your next turn. This functionally just means you're front-loading the cost of both halves here, so while this is definitely not a terrible card, it is a knock to its overall strength. 2 mana for a sorcery speed opt is a lot worse than 1 mana, and pitching something from hand to get a free opt next turn might not be as great when you have to pay twice as much mana up front. As a result of the rarity upshift, Discern's also being knocked down to common, so our Strictly Better Think Twice is now the same rarity as Think Twice. I think Discern will continue to be a very good card because it's not actually catching any nerf here. I think Stargazing will start to fall by the wayside a little bit, at long last. I think it's still a solid card. It's not terrible. It's not going to squeeze into the same space as it used to be. In addition to the hit to Stargazing, we're getting a whopping 3 counterspell hits to tone back Blue's best stack interaction tools. The smallest of these hits is to Overrule Will, which now mills 2 cards instead of 3. This will likely remain the best quench for graveyard-centric decks like Izzet Terrors, but I do think we are gradually finding more reasons to care for something like Death Deflection, as players find key, triggered abilities that they care about more so than specific spells they necessarily want to completely stop. And it's also just a little more flexible because there might be cases where you couldn't stop the spell, you had to tap out to do something else, but you could still stop something that spell does later on through its triggered abilities. It's not a clean-cut solution. This doesn't just magically make Death Deflection the best quench by any measure, but something's better than nothing, and any nudge that makes Death Deflection a little bit more worthwhile is appreciated. Unravel Thoughts is getting probably the heaviest hit of the counterspells here, moving from a situationally cheaper cryptic command to instead just be a modal cancel that can instead flicker 2 creatures, trading out the other modes it had access to and the chance to pick up 2 modes for the ability to allow you to chant on effects from your graveyard onto this spell as you cast it, though you don't get the chanted cards back from the graveyard in the process. This might have some scary potential with Unmaker of Thought, allowing you to flicker disruptive creatures on your board while chanting hand attack from the bin, even on the opponent's draw step. So while it's no longer the ubiquitous powerhouse folks have gotten used to, it might still be really solid. Last of our counterspell hits, Shimmering Lakefront is replacing Silent Lakefront and joining in on the flicker pickup with Unravel Thoughts. Now, the channel ability allows you to blink a creature or subroutine and draw a card in the process. It's got some solid value potential for sure, but this does mean that over the span of a couple months, we've gone from 2 uncounterable counterspells to 0, so stack wars are a lot more real now, and leaner blue tempo lists can actually punch through opposing denial more consistently. Outside of Blue's continued dominance, the biggest story of last month was the breakout performance of the Druids package, with both dedicated Druid decks making it to the top 8 of the GP, and several other high-performing decks incorporating pieces of the package to even greater effect, with the finals coming down to Bant Fog control versus Sultai Shape the Pattern control, each deck packing 3 copies of one of the 2 mythic Druid legendaries Valir has to offer. Both of those cards are catching a hit in this patch, as well as a couple further hits to the dedicated Druid's shell, starting with Junie, Shaper Unbound. Her loyalty abilities have been changed up a bit, with her first 2 loyalty abilities swapping places. Now her uptick is the one tapping down a non-land permanent, though it no longer places a stun counter in the process, and her second ability has gone from a 0 to a -1 to surveil one and draw a card. Lastly, her final loyalty abilities moved from a -2 to a -3, making it a bit more costly to get a large body out of the Planeswalker. This is still a really powerful set of abilities once you get Ancient online, but the card advantage and board control won't be quite so dominating as it was last month. For Airy Layfused parts, For Airy Layfused part, they're catching a hit to their Flash granting clause, now only restricted to granting Flash to Druids. This is a Wilderness Reclamation on a stick still, so I don't expect it to suddenly be made useless, but you will have to be a bit more intentional with how you plan to pay off all the mana generation Airy has to offer. If you care about Druids altogether and you were playing Airy, this is functionally a very minimal change for you, but for the decks that were seeing a lot of success with Airy last month, this is going to be a bit more of a tangible hit. For the proper Druids deck, the name of the game was Voice of the Old Grove plus Aurora Buffer Exec, allowing you to pile tons of +1/+1 counters onto your Aurora and punch over all the blockers your opponent had to offer with little issue. Both halves of this pairing are getting hits, with Aurora being restricted to only recurring up to 3 lands from all of the cards in your graveyard rather than every land. I suspect this won't do much to move Aurora away from her overall dominance in this particular slot, as she's still quite the potent top-end engine and threat, but she'll definitely struggle to farm landfall triggers the way she used to. For Voice of the Old Grove, it's about time this thing stopped spitting out multiple counters on one trigger, about time being 1 month. The Ancient condition has been stripped from its landfall trigger, leaving it with only placing 1 counter at a time, and also no longer has Vigilance innately. Instead, once you're Ancient, Voice will not only regain its lost Vigilance, but also take to the skies, gaining Flying. This will likely be a significant tick worse in overall strength, but you can still curve this out into attacking for 3 with it on turn 3 with any fetch land, so don't expect it to vanish completely. I think this could still be a very fine card, all things considered. Less of a Druid's tool and more a mid-rangey anti-control tool, Ring of Promised Vows has swung in the same direction as Silent Lakefront, making certain spells too difficult to properly fight through thanks to its uncounterable clause. As a result, it's losing that clause as well, by way of now entering tapped and having its second spell condition instead put a +1/+1 counter on the spell if that spell is a creature. It probably won't be much of a mid-range toy anymore, or really a card that sees much play, as you can't really count on the anti-control piece to be an anti-control piece when it doesn't protect your spells from counterspells anymore. Lifehacker is taking a massive knock to its more unfair uses here, with each of its leveled up life gain triggers now restricted to drawing you cards only once each turn. This means no more drawing out your deck with Pact Beyond Death until you find combo plus a removal spell for the hacker, and as we'll get into later, this will also have significant ramifications for Eternal play. It's still a very strong mid-range tool, though this does hurt the interaction between Lifehacker and Blightstalker as well, so we'll see how much this really tangibly hurts something like Black-Green mid-range. Tokens was another major player in last month's field, thanks in large part to the power of Westvale Cult Induction and the massive Anthem provided on its transformed side, Faceless Procession. Procession providing a 3/3 creature at a baseline while Antheming your other tokens by +2/+2 was quite powerful, especially when removing the creature doesn't also clear the Anthem, but in multiples it just overruns any board state without issue. Now, Faceless Procession has gone from creating a 1/1 token that gets +2/+2 to just being a 3/3 creature itself, while also having the Anthem it provides. While also having the Anthem it provides from +2/+2 to +1/+1. It does have the Anthem in the sense of it having that text on it. This is the mistake of using the word having in my script, Halving, but that audibly sounding like there is no L in that word. Anyways, this does have one subtle upside in that transforming induction allows you to swing with the procession immediately. Overall, though, this is a pretty sizable hit. I think induction will still remain quite powerful. The aura it creates is great for making a small creature more relevant or shutting an opposing creature down. And even in its reduced state, procession will be able to do a lot of work with wide boards of abilityless creatures from spells like the Ruins Awaken. The other tokens piece that got hit this month was Gospel of Dominion, having its impulse draw effect moved from triggering for each abilityless creature that deals combat damage to a player or battle, to only triggering once when all of your abilityless creatures hit a player or battle. So you go from getting a card for each creature that gets through to getting a card if any creatures get through. Obviously, this was really strong with induction because you could either threaten a ton of value and sustainability or just a ton of damage depending on which enchantment you had line up, and both could often come together in pretty short order. I don't think Gospel is made useless in this patch. It's still one card every turn, with each card it gets also being accompanied by another abilityless 1/1 token, but I think it's just nowhere near as overwhelming as it was, and I think it might need to be overwhelming to justify its inclusion in something like tokens. A different style of token deck also started to emerge last month, with a shell built around Gitander Wildlander, attempting to amass a large amount of artifact tokens and then funnel them into Wildlander for an onslaught of 4/4 bears. Harvesttide Procession worked wonders in conjunction with this strategy, thanks to Wildlander plus an artifact covering the remaining types you'd need beyond land and enchantment to enable Concord, meaning any treasures you'd make came in with one extra, and bears would come in multiples as well. Processions catching the addition of the legendary super type to help rein in the most explosive lines here, meaning that you can still get silly with Wildlander plus the Harvesttide Procession, but can no longer rely on multiples of Procession in play to help you in taking over the game more swiftly. Siren Covetous Creation is up next, with her second loyalty ability increasing in loyalty cost to -3, and having her targeting restriction changed from avoiding spirits to avoiding elders. She has gotten some play, seeing use in Abzan midrange and combo shelves, where her role as both value engine and combo piece can really shine. With her being one of our only free sack outlets for creatures right now, she works perfectly to pair with Feasting Predator and Generous Farmer for infinite death triggers, artifact sacrifice triggers, artifact and creature enter triggers, and infinite surveils. That engine is left unscathed for now, but her fair functionality is what's actually getting knocked down here to limit her ability to loop more individually powerful cards, namely Survivors of the New World, where she can no longer sacrifice 2 of the 3 survivors to get back a new one and 2 new tokens along with it. The type change on their animation also opens the door for her to interact more favorably with the adventure spirits from Solitaire, while still being unable to target the one key spirit in Valir she isn't allowed to resurrect. Survivors of the New World is also catching a change to ensure that Siren loops won't be happening anymore anyways, though. Because while sacrificing all 3 does still yield a reanimation from Siren, the enter trigger condition on Survivors has been pivoted from checking if it's not a token to if it has been cast. This does little to pull back on an otherwise stellar card, so a lot of the fair applications of Survivors will still be quite powerful, but Siren loops are no more, and if you're looking to just blink or resurrect Survivors of the New World over and over, you're not going to be able to yield as much value as you might be hoping. Though she did see some play alongside Siren and Survivors last month, Rosen is here less because of that deck and more because of her own crimes separate from the pack. Rosen's Ward X ability was prone to rapidly spiraling out of control to the point that she would functionally become hexproof, a frightening prospect for a creature that scales so quickly. Now, Rosen's locked to Ward 1, still affording her some degree of protection, but no longer allowing her to price opponents out of removing her. I think she'll still be solid, because it's very difficult for opponents to go mana positive on this exchange, but she's certainly a bit worse now, and mana positive might not matter to your opponents if they're clearing a 5/5 or 6/6 creature in the process. And she can very often get a lot bigger than that. The biggest boogeyman of last month, following in the footsteps of Envoy of the Fallen and not actually really appearing in the GP, was Rebels. Early league testing indicated that Rebels had quite a bit of sustainability, especially with so much of its strength concentrated around 1-drops with the muster ability that therefore would also efficiently trigger the muster ability. We saw the first domino fall in the emergency nerf to Rally the Rabble, stripping it of its ability to check creature spells cast from anywhere other than your hand, and now we're getting 3 more hits to the Rebels package. The smallest of these changes is to Vi, the first hero, who simply can no longer gain first strike on her muster ability if it's your turn. She's a much lower impact 1-drop on the face now, but with all the value offered on her transform side, that just means you have more incentive to build around the planeswalker than the creature. The next hit is to Ivari, Liberated Mentor, who's going up to 3 mana. The effect here, while narrow, proved to be profoundly explosive when coupled with all of the cheap muster creatures to make for a pronounced snowball effect that could quickly overtake the game, especially with the additional cost effect letting you gain immediacy and resilience to counterspells. This will be slower at 3 mana for sure, and with no stat increase, it's not going to be dodging removal any more effectively than it could previously. Though, 3 toughness is still pretty good. But he may still be powerful enough to justify use in spite of the higher cost. The biggest change of the bunch is to Volwood Warder, which has received a complete overhaul. In an effort to clear up that density of 1-mana Rebels with muster, Warder is now sitting at 5 mana as a 4/4 with lifelink and a completely different muster trigger, now putting a +1/+1 counter on each non-token creature you control whenever you cast a creature spell. This likely won't be the last of the muster changes we see over this set's lifespan. The curators and I have been discussing some of the more parasitic aspects of the current Rebel suite being so low curve and most of its payoffs being 1-drops that have solid muster effects and enable muster the most efficiently. For now, this is all that's changing for the Rebels, but if the deck continues to cause trouble this month, I would not be shocked to be talking about it again in a few weeks. While not too prevalent last month, Beck and the Beyond has already gotten to put up some solid performances in League play and had a 2-2 finish in Raboka's Witchery deck in the GP. The ability to hold up counter magic and beckon for whichever was best for you was maybe a bit too strong, so beckon is now a sorcery, asking you to commit a bit more immediately to making it happen. I think this is mostly a knock to the wish mode, as 3 mana to forecast your opponent what planeswalker you're looking to play next turn can be pretty hard to make line up. But with the Read the Bones mode still being really solid, I think there is room for beckon to put in some work. I think you might have to be more willing to just play this as a 3-mana draw to. The planeswalker that benefited most from Beckon's emergence into the field was by far Casimir's Bound in Flesh, whose biggest weak point was often just a matter of only wanting to draw him when you were at a point to play him and flip him. This allowed folks to get a proper feel for both the most dominating aspects of the card and some of his shortcomings, and both ends of that puzzle are being shored up in this patch. To start, his loyalty now begins at 5 instead of 3, and he now phases out when he transforms at your end step. But his -2 is now a -3 and no longer gains you life at all. Small changes overall, but the big news comes on the transformed side. He Who Shed His Death's passive ability has been fully replaced, removing protection in exchange for the ability to recur him if he would die, though at the cost of half of your life rounded up. All 3 of his loyalty abilities have also been adjusted, with his +1 being buffed to just draw you 3 cards and then have you discard 1, meaning you could keep all 3 of the cards from the top rather than just keeping 2 of those 3. And his ultimate ability now counts all cards in all graveyards rather than just your own, meaning you get to take far more out of your opponent's deck. However, that removal effect is taking the same kind of nerf as the front face, going to a -3, and while this one still does gain you life, it's gaining you 4 life instead of 5. There are some obvious upsides and downsides here, as he struggles a bit more reliably with picking off problematic creatures on the opposing board and protecting himself, but I think he's better at accruing card advantage, and considering his uptick on the front sets him to 6 loyalty, where if you flip him, he'll be able to ultimate next turn without your opponent attacking him to affect that, I think this could be remarkably strong still. And his passive makes it so getting that ultimate off, if you don't have to worry about that putting you so dangerously low as to die to burn from your opponent, might just make it so you can then just replay Casimir's the next turn uptick him, and be right back in a position to flip him again and strip a bunch more cards out of your opponent's deck. Time will tell if Kazimierz walks out of this patch weaker or stronger, but I suspect it will be the latter. Research Grant is going up in cost from 2 to 3, and its Enter trigger now mills 4 cards and fires off a delayed trigger to return any non-creature non-land card from your graveyard to your hand. Grant was proving to be a bit too potent in lower curve decks, where casting 2 spells was trivial and drawing 2 cards just asked for a cheap cantrip, which was already easy to double spell with. Add in our solid suite of cheap tempo creatures and the explosiveness of the transformed side doubling up your spells, and it's no wonder that blue-red tempo dominated the back half of last season. Now, Grant is slower to come down and slower to transform as a result, while having a bit more recursive value at the cost of being more interactable, since you can get your graveyard hated out between the mill and the return. I think it might still be worth trying because the transformed side is still just so strong, but it's going to be a little bit trickier to make it all line up. Flutter is having its graveyard shuffling mode knocked down to only shuffling away up to 3 target cards from the player's graveyard. Revolution is no stranger to Elixir of Immortality effects. We had the namesake itself back in Blood like Rivers after all, but 1 mana to do so from hand at instant speed, with the flexibility to also shut off the opponent's graveyard or protect a creature on your board from targeted removal, was a bit too much. If you aren't convinced that this thing could warp games around it, please just watch Game 3 of my Round 2 match from last month's GP. I promise you, that 1-hour match has me believing this was a very necessary change. Last up, we have Listen In, which is getting a cleaning up to no longer call out battles. Battles gaining the enchantment typing last month wound up coming about separately from the pre-rotation changes for Valier, so this just ended up calling out battles despite hitting enchantments, meaning it could already address them. With no battles in Valier proper, there's no reason for this to specifically call them out anymore. As for our second ever Eternal Exhibition, the big thing to talk about are how new sets might impact existing strategies, how decks from last time might adapt to a new field, and how one nerf from today is the death knell for one of Eternal's big combo shells. Let's start with that nerf. The hit to Life Hacker spells the end of Bell Hacker combo. Bell Hacker was far and away the strongest of Eternal's pre-existing control decks in my opinion, emerging first at December's GP Elseworlds, our first Eternal tournament with Life Hacker, and getting into the top cut in the hands of Scribble. And to my recollection, it did really well back in the Eternal Exhibition as well this past February. With Life Hacker limited to 1 draw per turn now, however, the combo kill between Bell Tower and Life Hacker is no more. I think Bell Tower will remain a solidly powerful control tool in the field, but we just might not be seeing it in white-black moving forward. Speaking of that top-cut player, Scribble won the last exhibition with the pairing of Divine Repurposing and Alwanor the Humbled Star, pulling together a polymorph creature cheat deck that could take advantage of Alwanor to minimize bad draws by way of your polymorph target being a 2-mana dork in the worst-case scenario that it ends up in your hand. The core of that engine remains, and it may be something to come with a real plan for now, as much of the field was not ready to fight a 10-mana 10/10 hitting play as soon as turn 3 last time. I think the deck could still absolutely shine, but it might not be the best place to be if folks are really actively preparing for it this time, because it kind of just blindsided everyone last February. As far as newcomers are concerned, Valier and Innistrad both have a solid handful of tools that are pretty obvious: general purpose interaction, cantrips, the like, counterspells. But there are also some more deck-specific pieces for each set to bring for consideration. Humming Furnace gives us 12 total copies of colorless lands that can enter tapped to create artifact tokens when you play them. Shape the Pattern gives a new toolbox option for decks looking to try something other than Acid Hydra, and Exultant Shepherd is something that really bolsters black aggressive strategies such as Mono Black Devotion that are leaning on Diabolical Minion to apply pressure, and which therefore might have additional life to spare for something like Shepherd. For Innistrad, there are some really strong pieces specifically for Hate Bears. Cloistered Haunt and Thalia the Guiding Blade are both really powerful creatures in my opinion, and both might really throw a wrench in the works for anyone who's not ready for them. There's also some combo toys with a 0-mana artifact and unmarked headstones, giving us ways to help bolster something like a Cheerios deck if we ever get that pulled together, and a new interesting pseudo ritual in Bleeding Tithe. I think Thalia might be the single most important pickup of this rotation for Eternal, and we'll see if any deck can hope to punch through Trinisphere on a stick when it's flanked by Henry and codename Viridian. And that concludes the Revolution patch review for June 2026. With so many of last month's best decks taking a hit, it's hard to say what will be at the top of the field this month. But with all of the changes we did get, there are still some quite potent strategies that got through with nary a scratch. So it's likely that they'll have a shot to shore up their weaknesses this time around, though there also are plenty of decks that have not been explored yet. Between the excitement of a new GP and the next Eternal tournament, there is a lot going on this month. So as always, if you want to check any of this out for yourself, the links in the description below will help you out for all things Revolution Custom Standard. Until next time, I'll see you all in the Revolution chat. Bye-bye!